when you guys went to your second deployment, you mentioned that you were a guard for prisoners.
Yeah. Yep.
That was, not too long after Abu Ghraib, right? Only a few years after. So could you still feel the effects from that?
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of regulations and policies brought down on us. There's a lot of supervision. Like we had to go through a lot of training about how not to treat the prisoners. It was very interesting. I mean, I think someone while I was over there got in trouble for like writing on a prisoner's back or something like that. Like the military is just very sensitive to any mistreatment of prisoners at the time,
Yeah.
rightfully so. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. That's got to be. I've always thought that would be just like a weird job, even not even overseas, but even here in the States, being like
Dude,
a
I don't
jailer.
know how. I don't know how people do it. Like here in the United States, like I had that exposure to it for about 9 months. I gotta tell you, that's the worst job you can ever imagine.
Well, I'm sure being a guard over there in Iraq is way worse than here in the States. I'm sure like the living conditions and the rules and everything else, like, and the prisoners, you're guarding people that are coming off the battlefield, some of which may be innocent, may not be. I don't know.
Yeah, you
I,
know.
I, I don't know. It's such a crazy thing. Did you guys ever have any issues with like them trying to riot or push back or like, any issues with the prisoners, or were they kind of docile after you got them?
No, I mean, there's a lot of times where there was like fights and stuff like that between the prisoners themselves.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't have any riots. It was at a weird time too when we were transitioning like a lot of stuff back to the Iraqi people, because this was when it was my second deployment, like 2009.
Yeah.
So we were transitioning a lot to Iraq. So we had to go through these classes where we're told like if prisoners escape, like we can't physically do anything to them. We can follow them and ask them to come back, but we can't actually have hands on to them. Like there's all these weird regulations and rules of engagement that are going on at that time.
That's crazy. That's
So
like
weird.
that's like what you tell the CVS security guard. Like, look,
Yeah,
man,
yeah,
tell them not to steal stuff, but if they do it, what are you gonna do?
yeah. That's
So
basically what it was. The prisoners didn't know that at the time, obviously, but
yeah, yeah.
that's what we were being told.
Were you guys in the process of like transferring prisoners over to Iraqi care, or were you
Uh,
guys releasing them? Like, how did that
We
go?
were, yeah. So Camp Bucca shut down 2010. So we're like the last unit that was actually active there while it was a prison.
Okay.
So yeah, so we were passing out. I think it was 183. They call them 180s, 360s. So one day, 180 prisoners would come through. We'd be the ones patting them down, giving them new clothes, all that kind of stuff, making them sit down, waiting for buses or waiting for transportation. They'd either be loaded up into a Chinook or loaded up into a bus and taken off of Camp Bucca. So literally, like we're in charge of getting thousands of prisoners out of Camp Bucca.
Man, that's
It was rough.
yeah. Especially, how old were you at the time?
At this time, I was, second deployment, 23, 23.
23. Imagine what the
Yeah.
average American kid is doing at 23 years old.
Yeah.
Compared to what you're over there like transferring prisoners and stuff. When you guys got there, was the facility like a long-term facility, or was it one like, hey, this is like a holding facility while we make sure these guys are good guys or bad guys? We separate.
No, it was long term. It was long term at the time. They had a school there where they actually taught like education to the terrorists. The whole idea. This is still when we were in coin, right? So it's counterinsurgency, winning hearts and minds. The idea was to reform the prisoners while they're in the prison, make sure that they had a trade, so that way when they get out, they have sustainable business, so they don't have to go back to the terrorists in order to find income for the families. So they had a school there for education. They had a brick factory where they taught the prisoners how to make bricks. So there was a lot of good stuff that was going on at that prison.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you got to do something for them. That's like anything. If you just leave them sitting, they're just going to get into trouble and stuff like that.
And then you have a picture of me like sitting against this building with like this nice painting, a mural on it. That was at Camp Bucca. So all those paintings were actually the prisoners. So there's one prisoner, they call him Picasso. I don't remember what his real name was, but he would actually go through and he would paint these amazing, incredible murals on all the prison buildings.
Yeah, that's pretty good stuff. Did you guys have Iraqi counterparts there, like Iraqi prison guards also?
So there were some prison guards. We didn't really work with them too much. We had interpreters and that kind of stuff with us.
When, if you did you, well, if you know anything about how their regulations were, how were they treated by Iraqi prison guards compared to like American prison guards? If you can speak to that.
How did the prisoners treat the Iraqi prisoners?
How did the Iraqi prison guards treat the prisoners compared to like how, like you're talking about the Americans are giving them like classes, like here, paint murals, here's a, you know.
It was a different story when their own guys were there. That's for sure. And same with other countries. Other countries don't have the same rules and regulations and I guess ethics that the United States military tries to uphold.
Isn't that crazy, man? Like when you're there 23 years old and you're seeing people treat other human beings in a completely different manner than you've always learned, always been told, and being in the military and what you're doing, I'm sure some of the stuff that went on, you could probably get imprisoned for if you were doing some of the stuff that like Iraqis would do to each other.
Sure. And that's where learning comes in and self-development and growth. Like there's power struggles that go on. I mean, you have power, but it's like really learning how to harness your power and actually use it for good when you could easily use it for bad. So, I mean, there's definitely a lot of personal growth that comes with it.
Were there any like low security prisoners that you could interact with? Like, I don't know what that kind of relationship is in a prison.
Yeah. We didn't interact with any of them. Not really. I mean, we the only times we really talk to them is when we tell them not to do something, or if they're coming through security checkpoints and we have to tell them what to do. But no, we were very, very biased and just not forming any relationships with them.
So after that deployment, how did you feel about what was going on in the war? It was like ending around that time. Like you said, we were starting to pull out. I was also there in 2009. I was in TQ. And I remember we were prepping everything to start pulling everything out. And we actually had, and maybe the Army may have done something like this, but in the Marines, you could do your 7-month deployment. And for a little while there, you could request to roll over and just stay in Iraq. And with the next unit that comes in, they give you like 2 weeks to go anywhere. They'll pay for you to go anywhere in the world, a flight. And then that's your 2 weeks of R&R. And then you just do a whole nother deployment with a new unit. And the guys that rolled over from my unit that rolled over to stay on for another one didn't even stay in Iraq. They ended up going to Afghanistan. They were there for like another month, and then they shipped them straight to Afghanistan. So this was like the kind of the down, of major forces there. What was your thoughts coming off that deployment and kind of how things were going?
I knew I didn't want to do it again. I mean, at that point, I was just over it. Having 2 deployments like that where I just kind of felt like a cog in the wheel. Not really feeling like I kind of felt like if I wasn't there, someone else could fill that spot easily. I didn't want to be a part of it anymore.
That's a good way to put it, man, because when I was a mechanic in Iraq, it was kind of hard to like stay motivated, to like want to sit there and turn wrenches because you're like on a base protected, and my job is to wake up, go fix trucks, then go eat lunch, and then fix more trucks, and go back to my can, or my chew, and do it all over again the next day. And when you know that there's other people out there like fighting and like doing like actual like crazy stuff, it's hard to think of yourself as being important when you're a support guy.
Yeah.
So I know exactly what you're saying.